The UK Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is spending his Friday defending his autumn statement. On Thursday, he announced a series of tax increases and tighter public spending in a plan presented to the House of Commons in London.
To do is to make sure that this recession is shallower and hurts people less. So we have been careful in a very balanced approach to make sure that we're not making that situation worse. But as soon as the recession is behind us, then yes, we consolidate to make sure that we're balancing our books, and I think that's what people would want.
According to the Office for Budget Responsibility, which is the UK government's independent forecaster, rising prices and taxes will further erode people's wages and reduce living standards by 7% by April 2024. In 2024, the UK is likely to see a general election as well. Help with energy costs has been extended for all households, but Jeremy Hunt announced that a cap on energy prices will be adapted so that a maximum annual bill for a typical UK household could rise to £3,000 in April from the current £2,500. Well, for more on this, let's talk to markets analyst Susanna Streeter, who joins me live now from Bristol. Susanna, how do you feel this autumn front pages in the newspaper?
Well, certainly it's done the trick of providing stability as far as the financial markets are concerned. Unlike after the Trussonomics mini budget, which caused such market mayhem in September and into October, we actually saw gilt yields stay relatively stable. So borrowing costs, as far as the government is concerned, not shooting up again, which is good news, and the pound actually rising a little. What is really interesting is what he's done in terms of tax rises. Now, this is an absolute about face to his predecessor, Kwasi Kwarteng, when he really wanted to see those big tax cuts, and that's certainly what was on Liz Truss's agenda. Now what we're seeing is tax rises, but spending cuts have been pushed into the long grass. And even so, bond markets haven't reacted adversely. So there is an argument to say, actually, perhaps the government could have spent a bit more on those projects, those investments that are really needed to propel the UK's longer term growth.
Susanna, explain that to me. How come market reaction has been stable when those spending cuts have been pushed back to around 2025? Is that because of some trust that is felt towards the current personnel in Downing Street as opposed to the previous incumbent?
But it's also because of these big tax cuts, which will total around 20 tax rises, I should say. It's because of these big tax rises, which will total 24 billion. And that is what the government will be able to raise through these tax rises. And I think that's really what's reassured the bond markets, that instead of these unfunded tax cuts, we're getting tax rises. But I do think it shows as well that there is appreciation of the very difficult path that the UK is facing right now, because we're staring at a recession. We're already in one, according to the Office for Budget Responsibility. And this is this independent organisation that effectively does the sums on what the UK government is doing and assesses the way ahead. And because of this, if you brought in these big spending cuts at the same time, the risk is it would push the UK into a deeper recession and then make growth even further away. But there is also an element of surprise that perhaps that these spending cuts were pushed back to the extent that they are, because actually, will they ever come in? Because we're going to have a general election before they are scheduled. And so we really don't know whether we will see them in the end.
And talk to me, Susanna, about living standards. The OBR is pretty clear that we're in for a miserable couple of years for UK households.
Yes, certainly the biggest drop in living standards on records. What the UK population is having to deal with right now, because, of course, we have soaring inflation, 11.1%. and particularly grocery bills up by more than 14%. And so many families are feeling the pinch. And at the same time, the vast majority will be hit by these tax rises, although of course there is going to be much more support to those very poorest in society, because benefits will be uprated with inflation, and also there will be some extra support in terms of £900 cash payments for those families, those households that are on certain benefits. So there is more help for those who are the poorest, but certainly across great swathes of the middle ground, people are going to have a lot less money to cope with all of these rising prices. And that is likely to have deflationary effects, and that is why inflation is forecast to be coming down pretty sharply next year, and unemployment is forecast to rise, although not to the level that the Bank of England did predict just earlier this month.
Susanna Streeter, thank you.